Well, good evening. Welcome to St. Croix County's third annual Mental Health Symposium entitled Supporting Young Minds, Understanding Mental Health in Emerging Adults. My name is Bob Rarrett. I'm the Director of Health and Human Services for St. Croix County. And we hope tonight's symposium will enhance your awareness and understanding of the mental health and substance use challenges facing today's youth and emerging adults. We're very pleased you're joining us to further explore this topic through data and research, to celebrate victories, and to pave the way for a future where every young person has the support they need to thrive. And before we get started tonight, I'd like to acknowledge that May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and these things may be connected, but today is also St. Croix Central's School Principal Appreciation Day. Thank you, school principals. I haven't had to meet you yet personally, so that's a good thing. And thank you to St. Croix Central School District for providing this venue tonight to host our event. Just a few more thank yous, and then we'll get into this. First of all, thanks to all of you for coming tonight, taking the time out of your evening to be here, especially when it's a nice evening like this. I want to thank our speakers, our panelists, staff, and our planning committee for all of your time and efforts into the River Channel for recording tonight's event. Thank you to the St. Croix County Board Supervisors for supporting this event, and all policymakers, helping professionals, and educators who are here tonight as we discuss this important topic. And a special thanks to Busy Bean for providing refreshments. Second year in a row they've done that. Also, our community partners who are hosting the resource tables out there, just out in the lobby. I don't think you could miss them coming in. Last thing, I also want to acknowledge that our discussions tonight will touch on sensitive topics, including suicide. So if anyone feels the need to get up and take a break, feel free to do so. We want to create a safe and supportive environment for everyone. So the way this will go tonight, the way that we hope this will go tonight, is that our first speakers will come up and talk a little bit about data to help describe the issue that we're talking about, and also to offer some insight into some of the service areas that provide support to young people and to adults in our communities. Our keynote speakers will then provide you with additional insight through research and practice, and offer guidance, turn the page, offer guidance on how to approach and help someone experiencing difficulties with their mental health and/or substance use. You'll also hear from certified peer specialists who are professionals with lived experience in the areas of mental health and addiction, and our panel of young people currently navigating this transition from youth to adult responsibilities. And then we'll save some time at the end for questions. All of our panelists, all of our speakers will be up here so you can ask questions at the end. And I just want to thank you again for being here. I think we're ready to get started. I'd like to introduce our first presenters, who are two leaders from our Health and Human Services Department, Ellie Clausen and James Tabbitt. Ellie is the Interim Public Health Division Administrator and Health Officer for St. Croix County. And James is the supervisor with our Comprehensive Community Services Program, or division, which he'll talk more about. I believe Ellie is first up, and if you're ready, Ellie, I was supposed to advance this slide. There's the agenda. I think that's all I have to do, so I'll let Ellie take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Today I will be presenting, can't get too close, on youth mental health through data. Give me one moment as I transition. All right, as Bob said, again, I would like to reiterate that I am going to be sharing some data that involves themes of mental health concerns, self-harm, and suicidal intent. So youth mental health today is actually in a crisis state. In the past 10 years, trends in high school students' health and well-being have worsened significantly, and especially in the areas of mental health, suicidal thoughts and behaviors, and experiences of violence. What has really dominated this field for youth mental health today has been their experiences through COVID-19, social media, and school shootings. So, in regards to the COVID-19 impact on youth mental health, it wasn't so great pre-pandemic to start with. Around 20% of children ages 13 to 17 had a mental, emotional, developmental, or behavioral disorder. 1 in 3 high school students pre-pandemic reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness, and depression diagnoses increased by 24% between 2016 and 2019. 19% of those high school students seriously considered attempting suicide, increasing 36% in a decade. And 16% had made a suicide plan in the prior year. This was an increase of 44% in the past decade. Well, then what happened during the pandemic? During the pandemic, 37% of high school students reporting experiencing poor mental health. 44% of students reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness. And contributing to even worse, exacerbating that mental health state for youth, was having a mental health challenge prior to the pandemic, was having parents, caregivers who were frontline workers or were at an elevated risk of burnout or mental health issues themselves. Increasing their risk was also just being worried about COVID-19, experiencing disruptions in routines, in not seeing their friends, not connecting at athletic events or in school, and experiencing more adverse childhood experience, such as abuse or neglect within the home, violence, discrimination. There was financial instability, there were food shortages, there was housing instability, and then there was the trauma to youth mental health of losing a loved one, a parent, or a caregiver to COVID-19. Moving on to social media. Roughly 95% of youth ages 13 to 17 report using a social media platform. The effects of this have been measured in multiple studies. They do vary, but the predominant findings is that it's actually a dose-response relationship. So the more you use, the more we use social, I'm like a little afraid I'll make a reverb, so. The more social media is used by students, the greater risk they are of depression, anxiety, self-harm, and the risk of suicidal intent. And this effect, unfortunately, is seen greater in girls. This will be a trend that will continue. And on to school shootings. So in the past 25 years, there were nearly 1,500 school shootings in the US, which is 57 times greater than all other major industrialized nations combined. And so of the 60% of the school's 27 school-based shootings, those have occurred in the last 8 years. There's just been a dramatic spike since 1970. So what does this cause? The long-term physical and mental trauma of experiencing a school shooting as anxiety, depression, PTSD, that post-traumatic stress disorder, hypervigilance, fear, increased participation in risky behaviors. And for youth that have experienced a school shooting, they are 2 times more likely to have a pain disorder. For youth that have experienced a school shooting, they are 68% more likely to have a psychiatric diagnosis. And for youth that have experienced a school shooting, they are 144% more likely to have a substance use disorder. Okay, to transition now, let's look at the situation here in Wisconsin. So the Wisconsin Office of Children's Mental Health releases an annual report. This is based off of youth-collected data from Wisconsin high schools. So from 2016 to 2021, we did have some improvements. Bullying decreased, the teen birth rate decreased, and there was more support within the school systems. So we had increased social workers, increased school counselors, and increased number of school psychologists. But unfortunately, things also decreased. We had school connectedness decreased. The percentage of depressed high school students increased to 34%. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender youth seriously considering suicide increased to almost 1 in 2, up to 50%. 1 out of every 2, excuse me. And the students who vape frequently, which is 20 or more days in a month, increased to 33%. So this data is based on what's called the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is implemented every 2 years within St. Croix County, within the state of Wisconsin, and nationwide. So the data I'll be looking at now is from the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. They have done the 2023, but they have not released the data to us yet. So for in 2021, there were 6 of the St. Croix County school districts participated, which is 75%, which equaled about 2,500 responses, representing about 53% of the high school students here in St. Croix County. And just to note, 100% of these responses, or the data I will present, is self-reported. So if we look at who filled out the survey, we have about equal female and male, and then the race ethnicity is proportionate to about the student body, with the predominant being white. What we found in 2021 is that anxiety and depression are at high rates. We haven't seen any data to say that the situation is any different today. We did get a significant increase from 2019 in self-reported depression in females. Now, self-reported depression, they define it, and people responded to feeling so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that they stopped doing their usual activities. So that has increased to 40% in 2021. 1 in 2 high school students reported a significant problem with anxiety, and 64% of high school girls report a significant problem in anxiety. Again, we're seeing the differential with the worst mental health outcomes finding in females. In terms of self-harm and suicide, females again are more likely to self-harm. Out of every 100 students, we had 28 female students who had reported self-harm, whereas we had 11 male students. And 20% of students have reported engaging in self-harm at least once. Of those youth here in St. Croix County with suicidal thoughts and behaviors, in the past 12 months before the survey was completed, 21% of females considered suicide. We had 11% of males and 16% then in the total student body. Actually having a plan, 16% of those 21% actually had a plan. 8% in in males, and 12% of the students. 7% of the high school students in the 2021 survey reported attempting suicide. What contributes to this? So just a brief look at the high school climate. Bullying, we actually had only a significant increase in online bullying of the freshman class. Otherwise, bullying between our 2019 survey and the 2021 survey went down. Unfortunately, school connectedness went down with a significant decrease in females agreeing to feeling connected at school. And then, of course, it was the pandemic, and so that teacher and school confidant, that person within the building that they felt that they could confide in, went down for males and females, for the whole student body. And in emotional support, 47% of the respondent students said that they rarely or never get the support that they need. And so who are these students returning to for emotional support? 50% of the time they responded they go to their peers, about 1/3 to their adults, and then 17% were unsure of who to turn to for emotional support. The YRBS looks at a couple populations that are of significant interest due to the impact on their mental health, one of them being those in poverty. YRBS gets at this by asking about food insecurity. So they ask, have they experienced hunger due to a lack of food at home in the past 30 days? As you can see here, 16% of students reported experiencing hunger due to a lack of food. Of those 16%, 15% were white students, 25% were Hispanic students, 27% were Asian and Pacific Islander students, and 37% were of mixed race students. So you can see across the board, those who experience food insecurity have greater percentages of feeling depression, problems with anxiety, and feeling isolated, a lower sense of belonging among their peers. The other group impacted is the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students. They report a lower sense of belonging, experiencing more bullying. They are more likely to self-harm and have greater mental health concerns than their peers. What we're seeing here is in sense of belonging in comparison to those students that identify as straight or cisgender, they experience a lower sense of belonging from 2021. The trend continues from 2019 to 2021. As well, with bullying actually increased in 2021 to 45% reporting bullying. Self-harm went down, but we still have half of the students who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender reporting self-harm. And very concerning, we have 84% of this population reporting a mental health concern. Now, this data I'm presenting to you is kind of the most updated data I can present, which is data directly from our our emergency departments. So this is under the National Syndromic Surveillance Program, and what you're seeing here is from February 1st to April 26th, when I last pulled this data. So about 3 months, this was a number of individuals who presented to the emergency department for suicidal ideation. So there were 8 11 to 17-year-olds in the emergency room. There were 14 18 to 25-year-olds, and in terms of self-harm, in the same amount of time from February 1st, there were 5 11 to 17-year-olds in the emergency department because of self-harm, and 3 18 to 25-year-olds. Now, it says up there, but these are St. Croix County residents who either reported to an emergency department within St. Croix County, just outside within the state of Wisconsin, or over in Minnesota. So all that data comes in together through this surveillance program. All right, that is the situation as I can present to you today. Thank you very much for your attention. And I just want to say thank you for being here this evening, as mental health conditions are real, they are treatable, and they deserve our care and compassion. Thanks.
Yeah, no, sound okay? Wonderful. Thank you, Ellie. My name is James Tabb, as Bob mentioned. I'm a supervisor with the St. Croix County CCS program. I'm going to do a shameless plug for our program. We are one of the responses that St. Croix County has to the mental health needs of emerging adults. And I'll also talk about some data that we collected from our staff, who are the frontline workers working with kids and adults every day. First off, CCS is a person-centered, community-based mental health and substance use disorder treatment program. We offer eligible recipients opportunities to receive traditional, non-traditional based treatments. Traditional is going to be outpatient mental health, substance use disorder services. Non-traditional, some of the things we're known for, is equine or horse therapy, people call it. Also yoga, utilizing peer mentorship. Animal therapy, we get pretty creative, and the plus of our CCS program is MA allows us to bill for it. Our goal with CCS is to reduce the impact of mental health illness and substance use disorder issues in the community. To attain the best possible level of functioning, stability, and independence for our service recipients, our goal is to get in, help, and then get people back to outpatient services only when possible. We also want to help mediate services between recipients and providers. Our service facilitators are our social workers. They work both for recipients or clients and also for the providers. One of our strengths is if we have someone who's been referred to mental health therapy or substance use therapy and they're not showing up, we put in a social worker to help kind of bridge that gap, whether they just don't feel comfortable, whether they need someone to go with them for the first time, or someone just explain the importance of services and therapy. Our philosophy, and I think it's the theme of the night, is that mental illness and substance use disorders are treatable conditions from which most people can recover when adequate and early supports are made available. We take referrals whenever we can get them, but sometimes we get them from emergency services, sometimes we get them from probation, CPS, youth justice, but whenever possible, we try to get them from the community. I know part of our outreach program for CCS recently sent out, if you work for the school, about 600 emails just sharing about our program. We did get an influx of referrals from our school in the community, so which we really appreciate. We also believe that recovery occurs in communities where individuals and families live. So we are community-based services, which means we try to bring services to the people. We can bring therapy into their homes. We can bring them out to a ranch if they want to do horse therapy. We bring services wherever people need us to be within the county. Who is eligible? You do need to be a county resident. There's a functional eligibility component. There's a functional screen to determine the appropriate services that you might be eligible for when you come into the program. Usually we're looking for folks that maybe they tried traditional outpatient services and they're not getting the results they want. We then like to add CCS to improve the quality and impact of that service and work our ways back out of their lives so they can just function where they need to be with outpatient services alone. They need to have a mental health or substance use disorder diagnosis. A strength of our working with MA is also it's a limitation. Folks do need to have MA to be eligible for our program. There's a couple ways we can help them get MA if they don't have it when they call in. And if they're not eligible, we're not going to leave them hanging. We are social workers. We will try to connect them. There's many other programs within the county that can be helpful for people, and we'll try to get them where they need to be. Just a little bit about, we develop recovery teams. On a given recovery team, typical within CCS, can be the service recipient, that's a client. And just that name, service recipient, we have a CCS coordinating committee, which is developed from community members, county staff, and providers who help give a voice to the people that engage in our services, and they identify that term preferred instead of a client to be a service recipient. Also, as a parent or legal guardian, most of our cases are working with youth, so we're going to have parent involvement as much as they can within the team. The service facilitator, that's a social worker or your case manager. Their job is to bring the team together, to build the team, and to make sure that the family has voice and choice in the services that they're engaging with, and to make sure they're using the teaming process. Service recipients' natural, non-formal support system. That can be family members, teachers, clergy, community members, neighbors. We try to build as many natural supports as possible because when we do that, there's a better chance when they graduate the program, they're going to have the continued support they need outside of CCS. A mental health professional, every team is overseen by a clinical professional who's going to provide clinical oversight, feedback, and support as for anyone coming into our program. A substance use professional, if there's a substance use need or concern, we're going to assess for that and offer the services. Peer support specialist, that's someone with lived experience who can offer support, a unique perspective that folks that might not have been living in mental health or substance use needs areas, they will be able to share the perspective and be a support. And then our CCS providers, we currently in St. Croix County have over 52 different providers that we work with and contract with. What we're seeing in the community. So Ellie gave some more up-to-date information at the end. This is very up-to-date, but not as fancy as hers, because I did it. What I did is I surveyed our staff on the front lines who are currently working with families in the community up-to-date, and surveyed, we currently, every year, we contact about 200 families or so within the county. Over half of those, the original recipient or referred person is a 13 to 18-year-old. Most common mental health diagnoses, common with the national data, is going to be anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, somewhere in there. We also asked them what are the contributing factors that they believe that the families reporting or the recipients reporting are adding to their mental health. It's going to be their home life or family life, historical or recent trauma, and then loneliness and isolation. How do we deal with it, or how do we try to help? Most common services we're going to use would be traditional mental health and substance use. That's a lot of what we do in CCS. Next most common is going to be peer support and mentorship, or the IST, it's individual skill development, a particular goal they want to work on with a professional with lived experience. To help them sometimes if they're not in therapy. We help to get them into therapy by doing non-traditional services with the goal to eventually pull ourselves out so they can get what they need out of just outpatient services. We also offer parent peer supports. Parents need a lot of support if your kids are living with mental health or substance use issues. So we do have parent peer supports and coaches, mentors. We try to treat the whole family when we can. We're known for equine Nigala therapy, which is horse therapy. We have a couple different forms of that. And the next most common would be yoga, mindfulness, skills development, which are considered non-traditional services. In every team that's in CCS, you include a service facilitator, which is going to be the case manager or social worker to kind of keep things running as a team. And also there's going to be the teaming process, which is to make sure that the recipient is the center of the services, that their voice is heard, and also every one of their supports and providers have a voice at the table too, to make sure that we're not just telling them what to do, but we're giving them a voice and a choice in their recovery. I think I got to the end.
Adam said I had to stand like way back here, so you don't get the reverb. So the data that Ellie presented, it's obviously concerning, and that's why we're here tonight to talk more about this. And as far as our CCS program, our Comprehensive Community Services Program goes, I think we're actually looking at the future of behavioral health when we look at areas like this, because using non-traditional ways to engage people who have mental health or substance use disorder challenges is the thing that's been missing for a long time. And we do that through CCS by finding these alternative ways to reach people and to meet them where they're at and to provide person-centered care. And I'm a real big fan of that. And thank you, James and Ellie, for that great presentation. Right now, I think what I'd like to do is move on to gain a little more insight into these topics by introducing our first keynote speaker, who will be Anna Schick. Anna Schick. I'm sorry, Anna. I knew I would say that. And Dr. Schick is an assistant professor of teacher education at the University of Wisconsin, River Falls. She teaches courses on diversity and equity for elementary and secondary education teachers. Prior to teaching future educators, Dr. Schick was a middle and high school English teacher. Her research focuses on youth development, mental health, and supporting pre-service and novice teachers. She published a book in collaboration with first-year teachers titled Re-Narrating Teacher Identity, Telling Truths and Becoming Teachers. Thank you very much, Dr. Schick. We appreciate you being here tonight, and I welcome you to the podium.
Thank you, Bob. Good evening. It is really great to see all of you, and thank you for being here. My name is Anna, and before I go further, I would just like to gain a sense of who's in the room. So raise your hand whenever it applies to you. So if you can raise your hand if you're a parent. Okay. Can you raise your hand if you work in a school? We have a little group in the back. That sounds about right. Can you raise your hand if you work in a health setting? Or if you're a counselor, social worker, healthcare professional? Great. And then I just want to check, can you raise your hand if you consider yourself a young person? And by this, I mean 10 to 24. All right, thank you. And then next, I would like us just to think about an average weekday, so Monday through Friday. How many youth do you work with? And so perhaps if you're a parent of 2, you would maybe be a 2. If you're a teacher, perhaps you would be a 5 or more. So if you could just kind of hold up how many youth you engage with on a daily basis, usually. We see some of this going. Okay. 1. Okay, so just look around at some of those hands. And just consider, like, just the people who are here tonight, the ripple effect that we could make on youth mental health. So looking ahead, I plan to address these 3 questions today. And the first question I want to think about is, why do I care about youth mental health? I share this with you because I think positionality, experience, and context really matters when we approach mental health. So I'm going to ask you to do something brave. I'm going to ask you to turn to somebody next to you, and I just want you to complete this statement. I care about youth mental health because. So you can actually really do this in real time. So go ahead, turn to somebody next to you. Just say, I care about youth mental health because. All right. If I'm interrupting you, I'm sorry. Please continue these conversations. Thank you for sharing and for being here tonight. I'm going to share a little bit about why I care about youth mental health. I care about youth mental health because I believe the classroom should be a site to foster well-being. I've been an educator in a range of settings for the past 20 years, and this last fall in 2023, I started as a new professor at UW River Falls in teacher education. One morning in that week leading up to the fall semester, I gave myself a tour of the Wyman Education Building. This is where my office is located, and this is where I was going to be teaching all of my courses. As I slowly walked the perimeter of the first floor, I was looking for room 129. This is where I was going to teach my Monday, Wednesday, and Friday course. The course I teach is about diversity and equity in education, so I work with future teachers on how to approach and respond to inequities they see in the classroom. So we actually work with a range of real-life narratives and case studies of students experiencing poverty or homelessness, students with neurological or physical disabilities. We talk about cases concerning race and gender and mental health. And my students are asked to think about what they would do in a range of these situations. So we focus on how to approach each case to make a most equitable learning environment, and then how do we actually prioritize student well-being in this case. So when I found room 129, I stood there peering in, and I tried to imagine the semester ahead. The first time I peered into a classroom as a teacher, I was a student teacher completing my final year at UW-Madison. I was a student teacher for English language arts at an alternative high school. All of my students had tried another version of school before they were transferred to Malcolm Shabazz High School. They were giving it a second go. It was at Shabazz that I first learned how a classroom could be a site for compassion and challenge. After student teaching at an alternative high school, I went on to teach middle school and high school English, and after about 10 years, I walked away disenchanted. I was ending up teaching a prescribed method of writing so that my seniors could pass a diploma program exam and get college credit. I remember one spring, a student handed me a paper, and with an exhale, she exclaimed, "Can you do the edit round quickly so I know all the parts that are wrong and so I can fix them and move on?" I stood there holding her paper, feeling like teaching had been wasted on this, fixing errors on a page for a grade rather than improving or strengthening an actual person. Could teaching be more about useful feedback and helpful edits for a person rather than just essays? Fueled by my experience in teaching, I shifted my work to social work, counseling, and advising. After a PhD in curriculum and instruction, I ended up back in the classroom. Except for now, I was teaching teachers. On September 5th, I taught my first class in room 129. This room was filled with undergraduate students. They were all learning to become educators. My class had an incredible combination of future elementary school teachers, secondary math teachers, ag teachers, which I know nothing about, art teachers, science teachers, music teachers, PE and health teachers. And 1 month later, on Wednesday, October 4th, an outspoken, engaged student studying to become an adaptive physical education teacher did not show up to room 129. She was the first of 4 undergraduate students to commit suicide in a 2-month period at UW River Falls. The deaths of Isabella Shavira, Sabrina Hagstrom, Jasmine Peterson, and Mason Crum is a tragedy, and their lives and their deaths will have a lasting impact on many people. Questions and emotions engulfed our campus and continue to circulate as students, parents, staff, community members, and professionals respond and try to make moves to rebuild and strengthen the youth mental health on our campus. In a recent March article through Wisconsin Public Radio, Cornine Hess wrote, "The mental health crisis at UW River Falls is mirrored across the state and the country. The 2023 report from Wisconsin of Office Children's Mental Health estimates that 1 in 10 Wisconsin teens attempted suicide last year." Adolescence and emerging adulthood is a critical time period that both parents, students, and adolescents themselves have worked to better understand. So why is adolescence and emerging adulthood so critical? There are several external factors that contribute to youth mental health. This is a time period that is vital for emerging and sustaining social and emotional habits that are essential to mental well-being. These habits, like maintaining a sleep schedule, can strengthen mental health, or, like addiction, can be detrimental. Many of the habits formed in this period of life contribute to lifelong habits. Adolescence is also a time of new transitions and increased responsibilities. As adolescents transition toward adulthood, they gain voting rights, they have increased access to legal and illegal substance use, they drive vehicles down the interstate and dirt roads, always going the speed limit, of course. They enter into romantic interpersonal relationships, and they are expected to make wise future study and career decisions. Current adolescents are also emerged in a complex and unstable environment. Right now, there's political polarization, social media, COVID, climate change, social justice movements, AI, and global and national conflict and uncertainty. As adults, we have this tendency to make a callback, and we say, things were so different in our time. And while we may be grateful that things were different for us, this statement does little to help adolescents. Many of the factors in this complex and unstable environment are actually difficult for most of us as adults. So what we can do is collectively focus on sites that can foster interdependence. So while all these things are happening externally, there's a lot happening internally as well for adolescents and emerging adults. First of all, genetic development is coded in the brain at this particular time to tune into the social environment, to look for essential input to master social, affective, and cognitive capabilities like emotional regulation. The adolescent brain also undergoes the largest hormonal fluctuations of any time period, comparable only to postpartum and menopause. And I'm sure there are many in this room that can relate to those challenging times as well. From neuroscience, emotional contagion explains how if one person in a classroom gets emotionally hijacked, it's likely that others are going to be infected with anxiety, resistance, and a similar disengagement. Just consider for a second the precautions we use to prevent the spread of physical diseases. Imagine if we mitigated emotions with a similar effort. Cortisol is a stress hormone released when exposed to threat or stress. Stereotype threats, negative self-talk, or bullying can signal a threat to the amygdala, and cortisol is released throughout the body. It's so important to know that this is happening internally because cortisol can inhibit learning for 20 minutes, and it can stay in the system for up to 3 hours. So what do we do with all of these budding humans? We put them in classrooms. And in a classroom, emotional contagion is real. As I prepare future teachers, we talk a lot about neurobiology that can change the energy of a classroom. How a teacher designs interaction can directly impact oxytocin, cortisol, and dopamine. For example, rituals and routines release oxytocin and actually open up each other to social connection. On the other hand, microaggressions, even small things such as repeatedly mispronouncing a student's name or ignoring a peer conflict that's happening, can result in a cortisol release. And lastly, when we challenge students in a supported environment, research can actually track that dopamine is increasing in classrooms. So what? What do all of these external and internal factors tell us? Why do they matter? Why do we need to pay attention to neurobiology in schools? First of all, I think because it's a shared location. Adolescents spend an average of 35 to 40 hours per week in schools. Just think about the potential of this collective site. Secondly, diagnosis and healthcare. Most major mental health conditions diagnosed by psychiatry have an onset in late adolescence. This time coincides with youth transitioning to independent learning, or independent living, working, and attending college. So it's at this time that many of their structures and support systems actually shift or cease to exist. And it's actually when they're needed the most. And lastly, this all matters because it has a long-term impact. Any opportunity to make an impact on an adolescent brain could suggest a lasting difference in their mental health. All right, so how can we strengthen youth mental health right now? As we move into a space to think about strengthening mental health, I'd like to first offer a definition. So this is a definition coming from the World Health Organization. I think it's important to have this definition because I think so often mental health is framed so negatively. But mental health is actually a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stressors of their life, realize their abilities, learn well, work well, and contribute to their communities. It's an integral component of health and well-being that underpins our individual and collective abilities to make decisions, to build relationships, and to shape the world we live in. So what can schools do? There's extensive research, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, on the core factors that contribute to school mental health. These core features provide schools with areas to focus on improvement and growth. For example, at UW River Falls right now, I know there is huge efforts on number 1, having well-trained specialized support and personnel. Across campus, they have increased access to in-person and online counselors and partnered with external organizations. Further, I'm on a committee that's part of the efforts around number 4, having a multi-tiered system of support. In this space, we're looking closely at the support that's provided in residence halls, advising by faculty in classrooms, and then we're also looking closely at the roles of peer support. I think this comprehensive school health model signals the importance of mental health, and I also think some K-12 schools really still rely heavily on the role of a school counselor or a social worker. And I think this system makes visible the need to actively engage many people in a school community. So, I don't think I'm alone in feeling that addressing mental health can be really overwhelming and often feels like an impossible task. And because of this, I would really like to focus on small changes that we can make right now as educators, parents, or adults who care about youth. Sarah Kavanaugh just came out with a book that's called Mind Over Monsters, Supporting Youth Mental Health in a Compassionate Challenge. And what she writes is we need to challenge our youth in settings of compassion. So this is the challenge I'm going to offer to you today. And I'm going to challenge you to consider how you can be a part of fostering interdependence among youth. Interdependence is a long and fancy word, but it's actually a quite simple concept. Dependence is when we rely on others to take care of us, and we think it's their responsibility to take care of us. Independence is when we make our own decisions, we take care of ourselves, and we don't really have a concern necessarily for others. Interdependence is when we cooperate to achieve something that can't be achieved independently. So I'm going to think about some actions, and these are actions that I'm hoping could be applicable specifically to educators, but also possibly to parents or any adults who work with youth. The first thing I'm going to suggest is that we can shift our statements to questions. Dr. Amy Evans will actually speak after me about specific questions we can use to ask youth in crises. I just had a moment of Okay. I think they must have got flipped. So on this side are statements that I think we use a lot with youth, like just don't think about it too much, right? Or it's not really a big deal. You have everything, right? And what I'm asking you to do is to think about how can we just shift those into questions sometimes, right? How could we just ask, what's making you feel this way? Or empathize and say, I understand it might be hard, but how could I best support you? Or what do you want to do next? Now, I've worked with middle school and high school students for a long time, and I can guarantee you that many of the times you're not going to get answers to these questions. But what they do is they give youth permission to think instead of shutting down. The other language move that I think is really important is literally switching and including we. So not just me statements, but also having we statements. And one way I've seen this done a lot in schools is I have a lot of teachers who literally put some of these statements up in the room. And then it's also something we can think a lot about as parents, right? How do we model this? Are we modeling a purely independent model, or are we modeling how we can also ask for help, or how we want to integrate others in our decisions? Do the check. Here we go. Okay. So the two big behaviors and actions that I think are really going to affect an interdependent model to mental health are instructional routines and productive struggle. So an instructional routine is a routine that is established to learn content, but it also has a social purpose. So establishing routines in classrooms or home can often release oxytocin and support social interaction. We teach our student teachers, right now I'm working with about 80 student teachers, and we teach them to use instructional routines so that students build reliance and trust with their classmates. So routines in classrooms and home often build safety and security for youth. The next routine that we can get in the habit of doing is pro-social actions, and pro-social actions include helping, sharing, comforting, donating, volunteering, or collaborating on a task that's going to benefit others. Researchers have found that engaging in pro-social behaviors can lessen feelings of stress and also increase social interaction, which consequently reduces the risk of loneliness and depression. The other routine that I suggest getting in the habit of is inviting need. So I ask you just to think about, like, how many times have you checked your phone since you've left home? Our need to feel needed is actually addictive. And 80% of the time we check our phone, it's not in a response to a notification, but it's a reach out for social connection or a distraction. And so if we start designing things that actually invite need, we could see students perhaps shifting to that. One way I do this in my class is I have people assigned to take notes, for example, for absent students. And the last thing around routines is just offering choice and agency actually in your context. So I encourage my students when teaching to open up projects, writing or learning that's actually in the school. So study the cost of electricity for the school rather than a hypothetical word problem, for example. This then can encourage students to routinely look at their own context and actually feel capable to improve them. So in addition to considering routines that we can establish, I also want us to think about how we can generate productive struggle. Productive struggle is when we allow youth to struggle in a setting of support, but permitting productive struggle actually allows youth to develop strategies to work through something difficult. And up here are a few ways that we could set up productive struggle and support a productive struggle. First, we could reframe uncertainty and discomfort as information. We could support instead of fixing. So many times as adults, we can see the answer or we think the next move is really, really simple. With my student teachers, they desperately want to give students answers or help them to be liked. And so I often encourage them to instead ask, what part's the hardest? Or where could you look for information on that? Or show me how you did the last program. And then another way to engage in productive struggle is actually to celebrate the success of others. Celebrating others actually promotes growth mindset and can help youth to see success despite challenges. It also decreases competition and increases a sense of collectivity. And the last strategy I would suggest to engage with productive struggle is empathy interviews. And this is an approach we teach our student teachers, but could really be used by anyone. And it's a process that frames a conversation for understanding and not problem solving. So it's specific questions that aim towards that. So I personally believe the goal here is that we need to create an interdependent approach to mental health. The goal of interdependence is to create mutually dependent networks of connection and relationship. By building routines and increasing productive struggle, I believe that we could set up an interdependent approach to mental health. Mental health has become dangerously an individual game, and terms like self-care often indicate to an individual that it's their responsibility alone to care for their mental health. Rather, when we integrate these interdependent language and some of these actions, we're actually working towards creating a reliant and a trustworthy network. So I just would like to end with a few resources to offer the range of people who are out here. Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain is an excellent book for educators or anyone who's working in a school setting to consider the neurobiology of youth and how that matters in learning. The Breakthrough Years is a new book that's just come out in the last couple months, actually, and this is taking a scientific approach to supporting teens, and actually it's targeted very specifically at parents for this one. And then these resources obviously could be accessed by anyone, but I'm thinking about youth here. So Your Brain Explained is an excellent text that talks to youth and actually talks about what your brain does. It would be my dream that this is a whole course. Your Brain Explained is a podcast that engages some of these questions. And then Welcome to Teen Line is an organization that you can call, email, or text, and they are all highly trained teen listeners to provide support. So it's really similar to Uplift Wisconsin that's also available here. Thank you for your time and your work with youth. I hope that we'll keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Schick. And I should say that last fall, following the tragic loss of life at UWRF, we got together, some of us from our HHS department, our medical examiner, Patty Schochner, Phil Landgraf, our Veteran Services Director, Dr. Phil Ghali, our Justice Support Services Director, and a bunch of HHS staff got together, and we tried to think of something we could do in response to that. What could we do as a county health department to prevent deaths by suicide, especially among emerging adults? And that's where tonight's topic came from, was those events. So we really appreciate Dr. Schick coming, and our intention is to continue to support UWRF and all of our school systems within our county to prevent these kinds of things from happening in the future. I want to move along now to Dr. Evans, our next keynote speaker. And Dr. Evans, if you let me read your bio, then I'll give you the podium. Dr. Evans received her PhD in counseling psychology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison with a doctoral internship at Hazelden. She has worked in a variety of different counseling settings, including private practice, college counseling, and inpatient-outpatient substance use disorder treatment. She trains addiction counselors and clinical mental health counselors as an associate professor and program director at Bethel University. She is a licensed professional counselor in Wisconsin, licensed professional clinical counselor in Minnesota, and an approved clinical supervisor. Please welcome Dr. Evans.
Thank you all for being here. We've been talking for a while, so if you'd like to take a moment, stand up if you're able. One of my side gigs is actually as a yoga instructor. So stand up, stretch a little if you need to. Do whatever you need to. And then once you're ready, go ahead and settle back down into your seat. And take a deep inhale, slow exhale. We've had a lot of information coming at us tonight, a lot of details that are hard to hear. When we think about the statistics we hear about the youth in our county. So I teach at Bethel University, which is in Minnesota, but I live in St. Croix County in Hammond. This is my school district. My children go to St. Croix Central. I've been in this auditorium many times, and there's such a concern for the students within our communities here that we really need to really think about how do we talk with them when we know someone's struggling. And I train counselors, as Bob said. This is not easy for counselors to do. When I have students step into my classroom, especially in their first semester, they are scared about having conversations with people about suicide, about substance use. It's scary to talk about, even for professionals. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time tonight just giving you some resources. So do have your phones ready for QR codes. I'm sorry, I move a lot. I'll stay behind the microphone. I noticed my voice went away. So one of the things I want people to remember, and I teach my students this, is they're never alone in the midst of having a conversation with someone. As Anna was talking about, we really want to move towards interdependence, but we need to realize that with whoever we might interact with, that we have resources available to us as well. So you are never alone if you're struggling yourself or if you're sitting with someone who's struggling. So 988 is a resource. Keep that number in mind. Make sure that you remember that there's always someone that you can talk to. You can text this number. There's a way to chat through their website. So it's just a wonderful resource to be able to have at your fingertips. I love that there's Spanish-speaking options through this as well, and actually 240 other languages. I hadn't realized that before until I was looking up some of this information, and it's such a useful resource that's out there. There used to be the long number that we had to use. Now we just have to remember 988 to be able to reach out to someone right away. And I don't know about you, but this is with me all the time. And the youth that we interact with definitely have this with them all of the time. So knowing that we have resources right at our fingertips is really important. So I love also that you can get prevention and crisis resources through this line as well. It doesn't just have to be about someone who's struggling with suicide at the moment. So what about if you're concerned about substance use with someone? So yes, we can call the suicide line if someone is concerned about suicide. Well, we can call that line if we have someone concerned about substance use as well. But there's also a national helpline, 1-800-662-HELP is another one through SAMHSA that we can use readily for when we're thinking about substance use in particular. There's also obviously great resources within St. Croix County. I loved hearing more about the program that's available to those who have Medicaid. There's many other resources out there within our county as well. But sometimes we're dealing with friends, family members, other people in our life who might not be local, and sometimes we want to know what are the resources out there. So this treatment locator information is very helpful as well, just to remember that there are many resources out there that can be available for people. So we've got a hotline that we can call for suicide. We've got a hotline we can call if we're concerned about substance use, and that's even if we don't even know what to talk about with the person. We're like, okay, I have something going on. I've got someone I'm concerned about. I don't even know what I want to talk with them about. How do I do this? You can call any of those lines at any point to ask questions like that. The people who answer the phone are going to be able to help talk you through, okay, here's some of what you might want to talk about with these individuals. So that's just really important to remember. Those resources are always available to all of us. I remind my students of this all the time. Because even though they're going out into the field as counselors to work directly with individuals who are probably going to bring up some sort of suicidal ideation at some point, at least some of their clients, especially based on the numbers that we had Ellie share with us before, that is something that is going to keep going up, would be what I would expect. My students need these resources too, so don't feel bad about having to turn to resources. That interdependence that Anna was just talking about is so important for us to realize as well, not just for the people in our lives who might be struggling. But I do want to remember that prevention is always key with all of this. We want to make sure that we're helping the students in our lives to move into life in a way that is going to be more healthy for them. So one of the things that I love that's out there is this one choice prevention movement, where there is this idea that students want to move towards not wanting to use any substances of any kind prior to turning 21. This onechoiceprevention.org is a wonderful resource to have students know that there's other people out there who want to operate in this way. I want to spend just a moment to talk about these substances too, because in our area of St. Croix County, some of these are normalized. That, okay, that's just the high school experience, that you're gonna be using alcohol. Well, yeah, you're gonna probably use nicotine, maybe you're gonna vape, maybe you're gonna try that, maybe not. Marijuana, well, it's legal in Minnesota, so it's probably okay for me to try, right? This is what they're hearing from some of their peers, and this is what we want to fight against. There are students out there who really do want to avoid using any of these substances. Don't get me started on caffeine, but using any of these substances before they turn 21 because of how impactful it is on development. Some of the details that Anna was talking about with the impact neurobiologically, there's so much that happens related to the development that's happening with teenagers, that these substances really have a huge impact on their development. With the fact that marijuana is legalized in Minnesota, adults in Wisconsin are possibly choosing to use the substance as well. Exposing the children to the idea that this is okay, that this is something that it's legal, so it must be okay. Please know that especially for these developmental periods of time up until people are 25, there's a major impact on the brain development because of marijuana. So this idea of it's gonna be okay, it's normal, everyone's trying this. No, let's move towards helping students choose not to. Helping students to realize that it's okay to say no and to choose to not use any of these substances. Once they're 21, once stuff is legal for them, then maybe they make different choices. But instead, let's move towards prevention. I want to spend a few moments just talking about this idea again, that talking with someone who's struggling, if it's with this idea of using substances, or they've already been using and you're concerned about them, or you think they might be using and you have concerns about them, or you're noticing someone just seems very withdrawn, that they're just not themselves anymore. Perhaps they're not sleeping well. Perhaps they're not interacting with their peers anymore. Perhaps they're spending all of their time on their device. We want to make sure we take those steps to talk with them. And again, it's not easy. For my students who are training as counselors, it is not easy. For me, it's not easy. These are hard conversations to have with people in our lives. But what's important is to ask questions, to ask about it. If we have a concern, we often have this mindset of, oh, it's probably better for me not to bring it up because maybe that's going to cause someone to want to try substances or to want to consider suicide. We know from the research that that's not the case, that asking, talking with our students is actually what's most helpful. What's also really helpful is to be there, to be able to be there in conversation with the students who really are reaching to you for that help. They are reaching to you for some sort of connection. We want to make sure that we are just open to them, to have that time to be able to talk with them. So be there. If we have someone who we have safety concerns about, we want to make sure we keep that person safe. So being there might include physically staying with them until they actually have the help they need. So using those numbers I listed before, we might be sitting with someone, helping them stay safe, getting them connected with the resources they need, and then taking it from there. One thing that often gets forgotten, though, is this idea of follow-up. So we've talked with someone, we've gotten them connected with resources, and then it feels really awkward sometimes to check in to see how things are going, but that step, that follow-up, that circle back around with someone is really important, because that shows that you care. That shows that you're thinking about them, that it wasn't just, okay, this is my job, or I'm supposed to do this because this is how I'm involved with you in life, but we're actually showing that we care. This connection that is needed is so important, and it's really key to do that follow-up. So how do we do this, though? Let's get practical with some of these things. So how to ask and be there. So be direct, but also make sure to listen. Listening can be very challenging when we are stressed, when we're in the midst of trying to figure out, how am I going to talk with this person? How am I going to make sure that they have what they need? We need to slow down, take a deep breath, slow down, and really take that time to listen, to understand what they're saying to us, not to jump to the next question, not to jump to, well, what about this? Not to jump to, okay, it can't be that bad. We want to listen. Instead, we also want to make sure to be non-judgmental. Don't take the time to debate and lecture if someone's struggling. That might be our tendency. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Showing the interest and support is really key, that we are really engaging with that individual, showing them that we're paying attention. Please don't agree to keep suicidal ideation of any kind secret. Don't do that to yourself. Don't do that to that person. Make sure you talk about, okay, I want to make sure you get the help you need. So you're asking me to keep this to myself. I can't do that because I can't be the only one who knows this information. I can't be the only one to help you. We need to take this beyond that. But offer hope that there are resources, there is support out there. There are people who can help with these things. Certainly take action as well. If you're meeting with someone or working with someone, or you are interacting with a classmate, a friend, whoever it might be, and you know that they have some sort of intent to harm themselves, remove whatever those means might be. Sometimes that might be including taking things out of our homes that individuals might use to harm themselves, including some over-the-counter medications that we might just want to make sure we only have limited supplies around so that they're not trying to use those substances. Teenagers and early adults have way too much access to information. So if they want to do something to harm themselves, they can very quickly find out online how to do that. And we want to try to make sure, if we are concerned, that we're removing whatever means there might be. And then please make sure you get help from people or agencies specializing in this. Don't try to do this alone. Even if you're someone who's trained to do all of this yourself, don't try to do this alone. Make sure you have other people that you are involving. We want that interdependence, even within something like this that Anna was talking about. One of the things I want to talk about for a moment is this idea of ambivalence. So ambivalence is something that is normal. Many of you probably experienced it this evening. It is beautiful outside. You wanted to be here, yet it's beautiful outside. It's normal to struggle in that way with ambivalence. It's normal for all of us to struggle with ambivalence with lots of different things. It is also normal for individuals who are struggling with self-harm, suicidal ideation, considering using drugs already, any of that, to struggle with this idea of, well, I want to do this, but I don't want to do this. What we know from research is that if we try to argue with someone who is feeling ambivalent, you know what happens in our brain? So if you're trying to tell me, yeah, you probably better show up tonight because you're actually one of the people who's supposed to be up there speaking, my brain automatically comes up with all the reasons why maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I should actually be outside. Maybe I should do this or that instead. Our brains automatically do that. So when we're working with someone, talking with someone, trying to spend that time with someone who is struggling, we want to instead have them come up with those reasons. Why not? Rather than us telling them. Okay? So that's a really key thing to remember as we are thinking about conversations we have. So how do we show that we're listening? Some of you, this is no surprise to. Some of you might need some more work at this in your own life as you observe yourself. So how do we make sure people know that we're actually listening? Now, there can be cultural differences here, but generally speaking, eye contact. Not constant eye contact where I'm just staring you down, like not that. But to have regular contact with our eyes with whoever's talking. That can be really challenging with these tough conversations. So we want to make sure that we are really focused on giving that person our attention, so our eye contact with them. How we stand or sit with the person matters. Trying to face them squarely, trying to sit or stand in front of them, showing them that, yeah, I actually do care, versus, okay, yeah, I don't really want to talk to you now. I'd rather be on my phone because this is really awkward. We obviously don't want to do that. We also want to consider just how we're showing that we're listening, because again, we're listening, trying to let them share as best we can. So gentle, occasional nodding might be appropriate. Not constant, but just to show someone, yeah, I'm following what you're saying can be really helpful. And then again, slowing our breathing actually helps the person we're standing with or sitting with calm themselves too. Even if you're doing it audibly, that can help them slow down as well in the midst of this trial that they're going through. Okay, verbal communication, there's all kinds of different ways that we can show that we are verbally listening. Some of those include asking open questions. Now, I'm going to share a number of closed questions with you in a moment. Yes or no questions are closed questions. But when we're trying to get more information, we want to use open questions, okay? These are the skills I train my students in, so they have these basic ideas of how to do this right. We want to affirm what they are saying to us, the work they're doing, the fact that they came to talk with us, or the fact that we're approaching them and they're still sitting there or standing there willing to talk with us. That matters. So making sure they know that we really are thankful that they're willing to stand there and have this conversation with us. Reflecting back what they're saying shows an individual that we have heard them, that we understand what they're saying. Sometimes that might feel like we're just parroting back exactly what they said. But if that's the best you can do in the moment, go for it. Just say, okay, you just said this. They might be like, yeah, that's it. And then you go on from there, okay? So that can be very, very important to show them that you are listening. And then summarizing what you hear. So I hear you saying that you really are struggling right now. I hear you saying that you're considering suicide, but that you also are thinking of not because your family matters to you or your friends matter to you or these pieces. So we want to really bring those pieces back to the person in the conversation. But again, just ask. Just ask. So Closed questions. This is a Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, and this is such a key thing to know is out there. And anyone can use these questions. Anyone can use these questions. So it's really great to have these at your fingertips at any point. So you can certainly find them online on the website, but there's an app for it too that I'll share in just a moment. But these questions have a wonderful research base that we know can be helpful to figure out what's going on with someone. So actually asking someone, have you wished you were dead or wished you could go to sleep and not wake up? That second part is actually really important. A lot of people want to skip that part of the question, but asking, have you ever wished you could go to sleep and not wake up, is important to know what the depth of their struggle is. Have you actually had any thoughts about killing yourself? Okay. So if they have said yes to this question, we want to make sure to ask the rest here. Have you been thinking about how you might do this? Have you had these thoughts and had some intention of acting on them? Have you started to work out or worked out the details of how you would kill yourself? Do you intend to carry out this plan? And have you done anything, started to do anything, or prepared to do anything to end your life? In between these questions, the listening skills really matter. Taking your time with these questions, but it can be so challenging because this is stressful. This is so stressful to ask someone these questions. So being willing to take your time to really hear the person, asking them, spending this time in conversation is keeping them safe in the moment, right? And helping you get the details so that you can get them the support that they need. So if there is a yes to 4, 5, or 6, call someone for help. Don't do this yourself. Call 911, call 988, call the ER, get the person to the ER, whatever you need to do where you don't feel like you have to manage this situation yourself. And if you have enough concerns, even with the other questions, reach out for that help as well. Don't try to just figure this out on your own, because depending who you're talking to, you might have a big challenge of being able to really be with them in the moment because you're really concerned about their safety. Perhaps it's your child, perhaps it's your friend, perhaps it's someone you're working directly with. We need to still be willing to have that interdependence when we're working with people too, so that we are reaching for the help we need as well. So here's the app. You can get it on Apple or Android. This is the picture that shows up for the app. So it's the Columbia Protocol. I have it on my phone. I encourage my students to have it on their phone. I encourage other people to have it on their phone, because what it does is pulls up the questions right there so that you have them. And you can just click to continue, and then you can actually say, are you completing this for yourself or someone else? So if you're the person struggling, you can still use this app. So someone else, and I continue. They ask age, so that's nice to know for that, and then to take it beyond that, and then we have those questions right there in front of us. Because in the midst of a situation where we're concerned about someone, I don't even remember these questions. Okay? Some of your brains might work that way, where these will stick in your head. My brain doesn't work that way. I want these questions in front of me, especially if it's someone in my life that I'm truly connected with. My training goes out the window. I need this resource to be able to help others. So please, please, put this on your phone. Share it with other people. Make sure that you have this available to you and others. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Evans, I think it's really helpful for people to get practical guidance and advice on how to engage with people in these difficult situations. So I really appreciate that. Dr. Schick, Dr. Evans, thank you both very much for being here. It's my privilege right now to introduce you to three amazing people. And if I can work the technology, you'll meet them.
My first experience with mental health challenges was definitely when I was pretty young. I know that I struggled with some anxiety as a child and maybe like a sense of belonging. Started off with just alcohol, and I'd say within a year it turned into marijuana for sure. I tried cocaine by the time I was 13, other substances. I had my first inpatient treatment when I was 15, and that was for meth. And yeah, so it kind of snowballed really quickly. I was never discreet about my substance use, especially my substance use or my struggles with depression when I was really young. You know, and it affected, like I said, my family relationships, my parents. We fought all the time, me and my mom, who's now my best friend in the world, but we used to fight a lot. My teachers, I had, you know, I think back to my principal in middle school when I was in 8th grade and 7th grade, and Mrs. Donaldson, and she was the best teacher in the world. And, you know, it's just, she tried to help me so much, but you're so closed off to receiving that help when you're in those dark places. But yeah, I think about the good things and the bad things, the people that were there to support me and that I wasn't willing to open up to, and the people that I hurt really bad.
When I was born, my biological father was actually in prison. So I was adopted when I was 2 by my dad. He was in the military, so we moved around a lot. I felt like I had a hard time relating to other kids. You know, I was anxious. You know, I had the hyperactivity. I felt like the way that I could connect with other people was by joking around and kind of being the class clown, so I kind of fell into that role. I had gotten some testing and they told me that I had ADHD, which made sense, and so, you know, I began taking some medication for that, which I later started abusing, and that kind of led into my substance use a little bit.
Early on in high school, I just kind of felt disconnected from a lot of people. You know, I grew up in a small town, small area, and, you know, it was kind of, you know, I had some things that happened and then I was kind of outcasted. You know, I didn't fit in anymore, and it caused me to be depressed. And I started trying to find people to connect to that were maybe like me or felt like me, and that essentially led me into substance use. You know, I started using drugs, alcohol, did the party scene in high school. The impacts that it had were pretty significant. I really just kind of isolated and became disconnected from, you know, friends that I had, and even my family. I didn't think that my family could really understand what I was going through.
Historically, I always got sober for other people, whether it be my parents when I was younger, my teachers helping me, and as I got older, my daughter. A lot of the times it was for my daughter or for the court system, but I feel like this time around is the first time in my life that I got sober for myself. I had lost everything. It was either I had to do it for myself or, you know, otherwise I wasn't gonna do it. If I think about like a turning point, like an event, I'd say that when my father passed away, and that was a huge wake-up call for me. And around the same time, I was experiencing a lot of overdoses, and I had friends that were dying, and there was just a lot of stuff that was going on. And ultimately, I had to choose either life or death, and I chose to live. So. I'd say that I started prioritizing myself and my mental health. I started like looking at, well, first of all, I went to treatment, and treatment is where I was able to build some coping skills, and I wasn't, treatment wasn't new to me. I've been to treatment on and off throughout my life, but I think this time around it was a lot different, and I was very receptive to what they were teaching me. So I think that I realized I really had to focus on my mental health, because that was a huge barrier for me. I had to focus on anxiety management, my depression, grief. I was experiencing a lot of grief at the time. And so yeah, I just really had to work on myself and work on loving myself and prioritizing myself.
Soon after my 19th birthday, I was not able to get my Adderall prescription anymore for whatever reason. I can't remember now. And I ended up using meth, and it lasted for a year. I had gotten into a lot of trouble, and I went to treatment for the first time, and I learned a lot of things during that period of time. I did an outpatient program. It was like 5 months, and I really kind of came to the realization that I was not like normal people, in the sense that I could not control my use once I started. And, you know, I accepted that at that point, that I had a problem. For me, I work a 12-step program, which is really, really important to me. It's taken me a long time to come to that realization that that's what works for me. I was resistant at first, but for me, it's like the service work, helping other people. You know, that's a huge part of my own recovery.
I was actually incarcerated, and there was this gentleman that came in and would talk to me and told me his story, told me all those things that he overcame, and I just kind of latched onto that, and seeing that, you know, change is possible, recovery is possible, and that was really the big turning point that kind of opened my eyes to I needed to do something different. The most significant part of my recovery is the rebuilding of the relationships that I messed up because of my mental health and substance use. I had not talked to my son for several years and missed out on a lot of his school things and just growing up life things. And recently, last year, I was able to attend his graduation from the Army. And when I was using substances and dealing with my mental health, I would never have been able to do that.
Average day I meet with like maybe like three to four people. And a lot of the times it's just depends on what their goals are. So in peer support, we kind of make a wellness plan, and they identify what areas they want to focus on and what they want to work towards to, you know, improve their overall wellness. So I think that like change happens with like little habits and like, you know, making those little changes in our life, whether that be having a peer support specialist come over for an hour every week and just chat with you, you know, and help you kind of like do some self-discovery work. Or it could be being able to go get your prescriptions, you know, from the store, and having somebody, you know, there's so many different little things that add up and that can build on each other to reach a goal.
I work with a lot of different populations of people. I work with elderly, I work with people with justice involvement, I work with people that are incarcerated, houseless, mental health challenges. It's a very broad brush. You know, I know that the biggest breakthroughs that I've made in my own life have been when I've been ready to make those breakthroughs. And so just being there, and, you know, obviously if there's consequences involved, I'm going to be honest with them about that, and we're going to talk through it, but ultimately it's their decision. And a lot of people ask what my thoughts are on different situations, and I try to be honest, and I feel like my experience is good for something. You know, it's like all the bad stuff, yeah, it's worth something now. So I think that's kind of cool.
You know, part of my recovery has been progression. So I've progressed where I can help other people. And, you know, daily things that I help people through and help them overcome is stuff that reminds me of where I was and the things that I had to do. And a big part of my job is just giving hope to people that are in that hopeless state and want some kind of relief from their substance abuse issues.
Just keep going. I feel like with addiction and mental health, with both of them, it's so easy to get stuck in the cycle of guilt and shame and being like, dang it, I relapsed, you know, I'm gone, you know, and it's important to just keep trying and keep going. Like I mentioned, I've been through dozens of treatments and, you know, tried to get sober so many times, and I never would have thought that the 117th time I tried to get sober that it would, you know, last and I'd be able to ever have what I have now.
There's so many people with this lived experience, and it's unfortunate that so many people try to kind of keep it a secret in some ways, because I think that it's just so beneficial to be honest and, you know, share where you've been, even though it's uncomfortable at first. Like, I just wouldn't trade it for anything. You know, I have friends, and that's something that I spent my whole childhood looking for, and I finally feel connected to other people, and I can be authentic, and I can be my true self and not feel judged. And that's because I've been open and I'm able to share where I'm at and how I feel.
You're not alone. A lot of times, you know, you're feeling alone, you're isolating, and just remember that there's all kinds of people out there that have overcame all those negative thoughts and those feelings that you've had. And if you can reach out, you'll find that out real quick, that you're not alone. And there's so many people out there that care and are willing to go to any length to help you.
Powerful. Absolutely powerful. We are so lucky to have peer support within our community. And I'd like to introduce we have two of the three here, Sophie Hansen, we have Jared Norlander, and also if we can get our panelists to join us, we have three panelists that are emerging adults that have agreed to allow us to ask them some questions. So if I can just introduce, we have Jared Norlander and Sophie Hansen, and then we have our panelists, Madeline, Anna, and Ariana. Thank you for joining us. So I'm going to speak to the three panelists that we have. They are all emerging adults. I bet you didn't know that that's what you are, right? So they're all very similar in age, but have very different experiences through their high school career. One similarity is either you're entering high school or in high school during COVID. In what ways do you believe your high school experience is different than the high school experience of students now?
Yeah, I would say that when COVID hit, it was a very difficult time. I was a freshman in high school, so I was just getting involved in having been down again. Like, I was an 8th grader, I was at the top of the school, and then I went to freshman year, and I was just a little freshman, scared of the upperclassmen, as I feel like most people are. And yeah, it was challenging to say the least. It was going to be like a 2-week break, which sounded exciting. That turned into months of uncertainty. And I think that now it's changed because we missed out on some of those things. And I think we missed out on that peer connection in some ways because of that time. And I think that it's good for the younger generations that they're not dealing with that and hopefully don't have to.
Yeah, it felt like I was also a freshman in high school, and it felt like I was just getting into the swing of things, and then, 2-week break, which was exciting. It did seem exciting, and then it turned into months, and then it turned into like a year. And yeah, we definitely lost like a lot of that like peer connection. I remember I would like roll over and open my laptop and log into the Google Meet, and I'd roll back over and go back to sleep. And I didn't pay attention to class like the majority of that time. So yeah, it was really boring more than anything. It was just boring.
I was in 8th grade when COVID happened, so I didn't really have to do school. When COVID started, we weren't required to go online or do anything. So I had a lot of family issues going on at the time, so I was just at home. My brother was born right when we got sent home. So I was just really me and him the whole time, and then we went back my freshman year, and it went back to what I knew as normal.
Thank you. You guys heard from Dr. Schick, you heard from Ellie, and they were talking about some trends with students that were surveyed in St. Croix County. And some of them, well, many of them had talked about anxiety, depression, and lack of feeling of belonging. As you three move into your next steps of your journey, are there any of you experiencing those same kind of stressors?
I would say that I definitely did. I struggled, probably since I can remember, with definitely anxiety and then depression as I got a little older. And definitely becoming an adult and dealing with the changes that comes with has been challenging in some ways. I definitely leaned on my mom a lot throughout my high school career, all the time actually, and I still lean on her a lot, but it's just different because I'm an adult, so she can't do all the things that I wish she could sometimes for me. Like therapy, I have to like get back into that, and I know that that's important, but it's hard because it's hard to reach out on my own. It seems scary, and so I feel like maybe just having the support or like the ability for parents or guardians to be able to just reach out if they have like some kind of way to do that, I think that would be important so that you're not as alone in those steps in early adulthood.
I would say that I was much more anxious in high school than I am now. Moving out was really scary, but I kind of just dove right into it, and now I'm fine, just hanging out. But yeah, I used to struggle with that. I think I'm a lot more chill now than I was. Yeah, I don't know.
In the beginning of high school, I definitely had a lot more struggles than I do now with anxiety and depression. I had substance abuse issues in the house. I was raising my brother. I wasn't really going to school. I was staying home with him. And I really only just had my best friend. She's still my best friend, and she went through a lot of the same issues as me as a kid, so I always had her. And then I got older, and I started growing out of it, and then I just graduated early, and I moved out right away, and now I'm on my own, and I like it a lot better, and I'm more confident in myself than I was younger.
Thank you. So Sophie and Jared, as you have moved into adulthood already, can you also relate to the anxiety, depression, and even that isolation? And then maybe how have you responded to those stressors differently especially since you've joined, peer support?
Yeah, so I used to struggle a lot with anxiety and depression, as you saw in my video. Sense of belonging when I was younger, that is what kind of drove me to my substance use and further mental health struggles. But I think the biggest difference now that I have compared to when I was an emerging adult or early 20s or teenage years is that I have the capacity to like kind of stop and not be so reactive. And I'm not perfect, I'll admit that, I'm definitely not perfect, but I'm not as reactive as I used to be. And just being able to take like deep breaths and kind of look at the situation that's going on. Not jump too far ahead in the future or look in the past too much. And also therapy. I like how Anna, right? I like how you mentioned therapy because I think that's really important. And any other coping skills, having friends, having a close support network, I feel like that's very, very important. As an adult, I make sure that I have a big support network around me.
So.
For myself, anxiety was a huge issue growing up and, early adulthood. A lot of things that I've done to overcome that and really, help my recovery process is just networking with people. I'm really big in the recovery community and go to a lot of different meetings, a lot of different groups, a lot of events. And, it was there that I realized that people need people. And, before I isolated so much and I didn't really get that. So now when I'm feeling some sort of way, I call somebody, I do something, I go out and about. I don't isolate anymore. And that's been the biggest thing for myself. And I know, being in the being a recovery coach now, that's what people need. So it's very, very helpful, and, just going out and helping people helps me. So it's huge.
So for all of you, what do you think are the toughest parts about dealing with mental health or substance use challenges as a teenager or young adult?
I think that the biggest challenge is still, I think it was a thing in high school and middle school when I was going through it, but I think that it's just a topic that's not talked about enough. I think that if we just all were more accepting of the fact that we all have issues of our own, that we can work together on it instead of feeling so isolated and alone, because even if you think people aren't struggling, everyone has their own struggles and their own issues, even if their life is presented as perfect. So I think just ultimately being there for one another, people need people, like Jared said. I liked that.
I think the biggest thing is just realizing that you have to play a part in making yourself better and improving. That's probably the biggest challenge. I don't know.
Like Anna said, I genuinely just don't think that it's talked about enough. Both my parents were drug addicts, so most of the awareness around it came from my mom and her constantly telling me, do not, even if it's just marijuana, do not get it from the street, you don't know what they're putting in it now. And I saw what it did to both of my parents, and I knew I didn't want to be like that. But even I had a friend my freshman year, and I was at her house, and her mom had prescription oxy, and she tried to get me to do it, and I wouldn't. I refused to do it, and she called me a lot of really mean names for not doing it, but I went right home and I told my mom, and I tried to tell her, no, you're going to get addicted, and she called me a couple months later because I completely cut her off, and she was like, you're right, I'm addicted to it. So I genuinely think it needs to be talked about more, and it's not as easy to talk about. Kids that never saw it, or parents that never saw it, I feel like they don't really know how to explain it the correct way, but when you see it, you know that you don't want that.
I'm just going to say reducing stigma and spreading awareness.
She took what I was going to say. But yeah, just the biggest thing besides the stigma that I was going to say is, how do I say, just being aware and letting others know when you're having a problem. I can't stress how much I used to isolate and do nothing about any kind of problem except self-medicate or do stupid things. So just being aware of what you have to do for yourself and reaching out to others.
Excellent. So discuss, and maybe all of you, just discuss the temptations that are present relating to alcohol, drugs, vaping, smoking, or any other recreational drugs.
I just wanted to say, living in Wisconsin in general, I grew up in my parents owned a bar when I was growing up. the same bar that my grandparents owned, that my parents bought from my grandparents. And I mean, it was like typical Wisconsin drinking culture. And so it was very normalized to be drinking all the time and partying. And it's just, I know that's not just my family. I know it's a very wide, the thing that happens here in Wisconsin. So I think that just being aware of that and just knowing that you don't have to follow in those footsteps. And the same with all the other substances, but I think particularly alcohol. That's really important.
Living in La Crosse, I mean, Oktoberfest, it's basically one big like open air bar. So it's like a really heavy drinking culture. Like all of my roommates vape, a few of them smoke weed. It's just gonna be around you and you have to like just not get into that.
I would say, like Ari said earlier, I grew up with a dad who struggled with alcoholism and also drug abuse. And I think it's just important to know your values as a person and know that even if it is around you and you are getting the pressure, that you can rise above it, even though it's hard sometimes, especially now. There's kids that I can't even comprehend the age of that are doing things. And it's sad to see, but it's also something that I think if it's talked about more and there's more open communication about it, I think that it could be easier for those people to reach out and see that they don't have to follow suit. Even if it might seem cool at the time, it can definitely disrupt your life in the long run.
I feel like my opinion's a little different on it because I was in second grade when I found out that my mom was doing drugs, and I didn't really know my dad was until I was about like 8, 9. And so every time that it was around me or it was offered to me, I knew what it was, and I knew what it would do to you, and I knew what I would look like, and I knew that that's not something I wanted to do, so I never really fell into the peer pressure aspect of it. But for kids that don't know and parents that don't talk about it and schools that don't bring it up and they aren't going on the street and you have your local drug addict walking down the street and they don't see it and they don't know what it will do to you. So they're just like, oh, it'll make you feel good. And they're like, okay, I'll do it. But I just think it needs to be talked about more.
I think kind of like what Sophie was saying, like the age that I grew up in and stuff, alcohol especially, has just been normalized. Every family event, every outdoor activity, everything involves alcohol. And then it's, become more, marijuana and a lot of the areas that I grew up in, and now it's methamphetamine. So the biggest thing with all that is I just try to normalize recovery now, with everybody just normalize not doing drugs, alcohol, doing the sober things, and that's what I, really try to do.
That was an awesome answer. You heard a couple of the presenters talk about social media. Talk about what your opinion is on connection with others, but also maybe possibly the detrimental side of social media.
I personally think that it is very bad for your mental health, but I mean, I can't really say anything because I go on social media a lot. People, TikTok, for example, the height of it really peaked when COVID happened. And I remember when I was little, I'd go outside and all the neighborhood kids were outside. They were on their bikes. They were building stuff with sticks. And then all of a sudden, all kids now, it's 80 degrees outside and they're inside scrolling through their phone to watch funny videos. And it can be really addicting. And on top of that, people can be very, very mean. And a lot of, you were talking about suicide and stuff earlier. It's caused a lot of it. People can say very, very harsh things, and they never speak up about it and keep it to themselves because they don't want anybody to think that somebody said that about them. Or people start rumors on their phones, and people talk about other people on their phones, and it can be really mean.
I definitely agree with all that, and I would also say that social media definitely peaked a lot when COVID happened, and I think that it was helpful in the way of you could reach out to people, unlike the earlier days when you couldn't do that as easily. So that was helpful that you could still stay connected. But I think that also, even nowadays, I'm a first-year college student, and just seeing all of the posts about parties and drinking and like the normalized, like how normal that has become, especially for even people underage. I was just talking to my mom the other day because there was like big parties in Madison, and I just was like blown away at the fact that there was so many underage drinkers, and it was just not a big deal, because it was just crazy to me, because I've always tried to stay away from those things. So I think things like that, it can have a negative impact for sure, or it can make people feel left out. So I would say that in those ways it's bad, but it is nice to be able to have communication easier, especially if you need to reach out.
I wouldn't say that like social media is necessarily the problem, more like just an addiction to my phone. So like trying to be mindful of like how much time I'm spending on it and like putting it away and going outside, going for walks, you know, like reading or doing a hobby or something. That always helps. Yeah.
I agree. I think it's addicting. I'm so grateful that I did not have it when I was in high school. I'm so great. I can't imagine doing work and, well, I guess I'm in school now, but.
I don't like social media. I mean, so on a lot of aspects. So I've done a lot of research on social media, read a lot of books and done a lot of things. And just the social engineering side of it is not right in my eyes. And it's just really detrimental to a lot of things. So I don't like it, but I use it.
Oops. So if you had a magic wand and you could create resources available for youth, either in schools or in communities like college campuses, what would that look like with your magic wand?
I think if I had a magic wand, I would just try to help the people, like, get into their mind and just help them, like, believe in themselves and tell them that they can do it and that they're not alone, even if it feels like that. Because no matter how many times you tell a person that you're there for them or that you believe in them, until they believe in themselves, nothing's truly going to change. So I think just, yeah, having a magic wand and being like, here, believe in yourself, please, because you can do more than you think you can, and just block out the hate and all the negativity, because life can be amazing.
I think that we need more people with lived experience to be in the schools and things like that. Personally, when things were going on at my house, even though I knew there was people, I was not going to go talk about it to anybody, because I knew that would mean me and my brother were going to get taken out again, and I didn't want that. So I knew that I could just stay home and take care of him and deal with it at the time, because I didn't want to do that again. So I also feel like there needs to, I don't want to say a class, but like students need to have, a class. They have to go and like have more people that have lived experience talking about things and talking to kids one-on-one and making them feel comfortable. And a lot of kids know that teachers are mandatory reporters, so anything they say that they think is harmful or things are going on, they're gonna go say something. And a lot of kids don't want to go through it, especially kids that the person that they're with, that's the only person they have, and they don't want to go into foster care, and they don't want to go through all that. So I think that's a lot of the issue, is we just need more people that have experienced it and that make them genuinely feel comfortable where they're at to talk to.
If I had a magic wand, I would make therapy and like all of these resources free, because I know I know multiple people who definitely need therapy who aren't getting it because they can't afford it, or it's not covered by insurance.
I agree with all three of you. Believe in yourself. Peer support. I'm huge for implementing peer support into school districts, especially middle and high schools. I think that's really important, and there's actually been a lot of it going on over the past year or two. So hopefully in our area, we can get something like that going, but also free services, right? Because there's so many people that are maybe above the income limit to where, their parents, have to pay so much money out of pocket, and it's just not realistic. So definitely all those services, everything else.
A magic wand, that'd be cool. I would do something just to take away the stressors, let kids be kids and get rid of the social media and all the things that take, their mind off just being kids. That's what I would do.
So COVID did a wonderful thing for the world of mental health. It put it in the spotlight, and the conversations changed. And probably maybe Sophie and Jared can maybe talk a little bit to how do you think the conversations have changed, maybe from the time you were in high school to now that it's become a little bit more normalized?
Well, I just feel like it's so different. I have my daughter, she's 13 now, so she's, middle school, and she talks about mental health all the time, and it's interesting to hear. I remember a few years ago, she was talking about, maybe 2 years ago, they had this play at the I think she was in 5th grade, but it was Alice in Wonderland, and all of the characters had different mental health struggles. So she's like, oh yeah, I learned about addicts, I learned about, people with substance use disorders, all these different diagnoses. And I thought that was so interesting because we never had that when I was that young. So I feel like it's talked about a lot more, which is a really great thing. And I'm just super grateful for that. And they have the Stomp the Stigma event that's next Saturday. So, it's the word's getting out, so.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing that's just talked about more. Like when I was growing up, especially a male in Wisconsin, we didn't talk about mental health. It was not talked about. And now, interacting with, my own children and friends' children, they talk about it at school, they talk about it after school, they're talking about it again, with each other. And it's really cool to see because it wasn't like that when I was growing up.
So I've heard you all talk about peer support, peers, your friends, and how important it is to have that in your life. So think about maybe the last 3 years for you. What have friends done for you as you've been launched into your adulthood?
I think the biggest thing for me was just finding my people, like the true people that even if they can't relate, they're there to try to understand through everything that you're going through. Because like I said earlier, no matter what, everyone has their own struggles. So just having those people to just lean on when you can't always believe in yourself or fully believe in yourself is very helpful. Especially through times like COVID and things like that, it was helpful to have those friends. And I know that even now, my friends are in all different parts of the state and even out of state, and it's still nice to be able to connect with them and just know that they're there if I ever need them.
I was never the type to have a big group of friends. I moved around a lot, and I moved to my Cameron halfway through 5th grade, and I talked to people, but I wasn't really friends with them. And then at the beginning of 6th grade, my best friend now, she moved, and we've been inseparable ever since. She went through pretty much the same exact thing that I did growing up, so she was always somebody I could talk to, and anytime we were in a bad situation together, we always had each other. So I don't know, she's always helped me, and I know I can always talk to her, and her family is like family to me, so.
I think the biggest thing is that, between like school and work and like trying to like take care of myself, it's like kind of a, just like a break to hang out with them, it's fun. And when we like plan stuff, I always look forward to it. We're going to Pizza Ranch this weekend, and I'm really excited about it. So, stuff like that.
I just believe that our friends have such a big influence on us, and being surrounded by people that are positive and that have our best intentions, and they want to see us do good and they light us up. I think that's really important, especially in the younger age, because it's easy to fall into the wrong crowd and have the wrong friends. So just a couple good friends is better than a bunch of mediocre friends. So I just want to say that.
I'd say, with the friends, for myself, like, I have friends now. Before I went into recovery and started doing the things that I'm doing now, I just had acquaintances. And now that I have friends that are solid and I can lean on and they can lean on me, it just makes everything go better.
We totally heard Kyle say that too in the video. So this is your last question. You've done really, really well, and I appreciate you guys. So you're literally on stage with a microphone. What advice would you give to someone who is struggling with their mental health or substance use but hesitant to seek help? We'll start over here.
I kind of touched a little bit on the video on this, but just reach out. You're not alone. And, if you can find that one person that you can talk to, that's all it takes, one person, because once it's out in the open, it's out in the open. And then you're going to talk about it more and you're going to deal with it. It might not be right away with, the mental health side of things, but it's going to happen. But if you stay isolated and don't do anything, it's never going to go away.
I'm gonna just kind of copy what I said on my video as well. Just don't give up. I mean, I really struggled with depression and suicidal thoughts and ideation, throughout my drug addiction. And I mean, that's what if you can just hold on to like the littlest glimmer of hope, just like the littlest piece, and have one person in your life, that can hold the rest of it for you. I think that's what's really important, and just keep those connections.
Don't be afraid to ask for help, because I know me personally, I really hate asking for help. I'm very independent. I just want to work through everything myself, and I think I could probably take my own advice in that sense, because I should probably do that more often.
I would say when it comes to mental health and reaching out, the grass is always greener on the other side, in the aspect of it does get better no matter how much. When you're down and doubting yourself and doubting that life could ever be good again, trust it from somebody who's been there. It does get better. You just have to be willing to take the steps to get there, which can literally feel like you're climbing a mountain that's never ending. But if you take it one step at a time and day by day, and you lean on the people that are there for you, it does get better.
I know personally that it can be really hard, because you get stuck in that depression and you're used to it and you're comfortable there because you are used to it. And so right as it starts getting better, you dig yourself back down in a hole because you're comfortable there. But you just have to find your person that you're comfortable with, use them to talk to, and push yourself. And if it's not only for yourself, think about the people that are around you that love you and want to see you do good with your life.
Thank you all for being willing to be vulnerable and allow us to kind of look into the minds of young adults. And Sophie and Jared, thank you for sharing your recovery journey with everyone. Honestly, that video was so powerful. It was amazing. Thank you, guys. We'd like to invite the other speakers up, and we'll have question and answer time. Here, thank you. The microphones are open if anyone has any questions for the speakers. And if not, we can move on. Okay. I never introduced myself. My name is Char Lopez. I am the Deputy Director of Health and Human Services. Well, thank you for attending the 3rd Annual Mental Health Symposium. Tonight you heard from Ellie Clausen and James Tabbitt on local and state data relating to mental health and substance use among youth and young adults. You heard from Dr. Anna Schick and on fostering independence, and Dr. Amy Evans on having conversations that may be difficult conversations with those who are struggling with mental health and substance use concerns. Our peer support specialists discussed their recovery journeys and talked about their peer support process and what is available in St. Croix County. And you heard from these 3 young adults on some of their experiences and moving more to independence. We wrapped up with the opportunity to ask the panel, and we didn't have it, you answered all the questions so well. So just as a reminder, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I challenge all of you to assist in reducing the stigma surrounding reaching out for mental health and substance use health. It is okay to not be okay. I encourage you to take the information you've learned and turn it into advocacy, action, and support for yourself and others. We encourage you to visit the resource tables and collect as much information as you can from the very resource-rich community that we have here. As we come to the end of the symposium, I'd like to share an inspiring story about from Lauren Isley. It reminds us that even small acts of kindness and support can make significant difference in someone's life, especially in mental health and substance use. Each one of us has the power to be a positive force, whether it's through lending a listening ear, offering a helping hand, or simply being there for someone in need. An old man was walking on a beach one morning after a storm. In the distance, he could see someone moving like a dancer. He came closer. He saw that it was a young woman picking up a starfish, gently throwing them into the ocean. "Young lady, why are you throwing starfish into the ocean?" "The sun is up, the tide is going out, and if I do not throw them, they will die," she said. "But young lady, do you not realize that there are many miles of beach and thousands of starfish? You cannot possibly make a difference." The young woman listened politely, then bent down, picked up another starfish, and threw it into the sea. It made a difference to that one. Let's remember, we can truly make a difference, one starfish at a time. Thank you.
That concludes our symposium.